Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Climate Fusion Talk. I am Lawrence Yen, the founding partner of MIH Capital, an Asia-based climate tech VC fund. I'm also your host for this episode. Today, we're talking to Vipin Tyagi, the co-founder and CTO of Ace Green Recycling, a lead acid and lithium battery recycler based in US and India. Vipin is a mechanical engineer by training, receiving degrees from Indian Institute of Technology and Texas A&M. After his studies, instead of going to the sciences, he joined Merrill Lynch and became a quant commodity trader. While the job paid well, Vipin decided to return to his mechanical engineering roots after 6 years in finance. The problem he set out to solve is the lead-acid battery recycling process, which through the conventional pyrometallurgical method is pollutive, hazardous to the workers, and yield a lower rate of material extraction. The pyrometallurgical process is essentially breaking down the battery and smelts and melts the components at up to 1700 degrees Celsius to separate those materials. Now, Vimpin founded Verdun Chemicals in 2013, which they developed an electrochemical process now known as the hydrometallurgical battery recycling technology. The hydrometallurgical approach separates the material without melting and smelting. Through the new method, no air pollution is emitted, and the water used is fully recyclable. Verdun Chemicals later became Ace Green Recycling in 2021 and have developed hydrometallurgical process for NMC and LFP lithium batteries as well. Today, let's talk about battery recycling, the technology, and the business. Yeah, hi Vipin. Let's nerd out about battery recycling today, shall we?
Sure.
Let me quickly set the table first. Climate Tech 2.0 really emerged after 2015 when the whole world agreed on a Paris Agreement, right? To reduce global carbon emissions and attempt to keep the global warming below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, all of that. And as you know, since then, solar panels, EVs, lithium batteries, these technologies started to show up on news headlines, technology conferences, and everyone's rooftops and driveways. And so we all know we need a lot of EVs and solar panels and batteries, and China started making a lot of these, and everyone started to buy a lot of these. And like any other consumer decisions, we rarely think about what happens to the waste after we dispose them, right? Some folks would swing by, truck them away,
Sure.
and we just believe the waste magically disappears,
Right.
right? And the truth is, like, I learned from you that, these batteries, they are either buried in landfills, which means high toxic metallic material is seeping through the soil, or they're incinerated, meaning emissions is being dumped in the atmosphere instead of into our soils. But these are not quite our concern, of course, right? Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. Yep.
And I really was able to learn a lot from you, Vipin, and certainly understand a lot of the implications by not recycling or not disposing these batteries properly. And looking into the US, the first lithium battery recycling unicorn in the US by private market is Redwood, as everyone
Yes.
may be able to research. And that wasn't founded until 2017, right?
Correct.
And that drew a lot of media attention. It was probably one of the key drivers for a lot of the public interest, investors' interest into battery recycling. And you, my friend, you got into it in 2013. It was before the Paris Agreement. It was before, decarbonization was a cool term. And not because you had to. I remember in our first conversation, you had a very cushy job, right? You
That's
were
true.
you were having a really good time, a fantastic career, certainly a very financially rewarding one in metal trading. So literally, you had to get your hands dirty, right, from the trading desk to battery recycling. And back then in 2013, it wasn't even a hot topic like today. People weren't raising hundreds of million dollars to do this business. And back then, there weren't this really cool term called lithium battery. You were still talking about lead acid batteries. that decade old, definitely not venture backable business. So, I really want to start by going back kind of the time machine. And I think that conversation really fascinated me. And I absolutely loved it. So, I really want to start from there. I'm going to pause and let you talk about your story. What got you here, right? What was that aha moment that you said, forget about this cushy job. I want to get my hands dirty. And, started thinking about battery recycling and decided that this is something you want to dedicate your career to.
No, no, absolutely. So thank you so much, Lawrence, for this opportunity. This is something which is extremely close to my heart, as you also sort of mentioned earlier. So I am at heart, I'm an engineer, right? I came to US, did my PhD in mechanical engineering. After that, a good friend of mine told me that you can make a lot of money in investment banking. So I applied for jobs at Wall Street, and I was lucky enough to get a job in commodity trading at Merrill Lynch. I was assigned this pretty cool commodity index desk out of the Houston office, which gave me the exposure of all the commodities. So I ended up trading the options book for the commodity indices. And by virtue of that, I was trading metals, energy, all across the spectrum, which really gave me the exposure of how big these markets are, right? Just being an engineer does not really tell you a lot about how the world really works. So being at the intersection of high-end finance and really understanding the logistics aspect, right? How commodities move from point A to point B, the importance of supply chains, the
Mhm.
importance of technology deployment. So, for example, I still remember one of the deals. It was not in lead, but we were working on a deal on like coal, and we went deep dive into understanding what technologies were being deployed at that asset, right? How do we get the supply of coal from the source to this particular location to do the processing, right?
Mhm.
And that really got me thinking about what to do. The transition into lead was more about I was trying to figure out what to do next. As you mentioned, I mean, I really had a really cushy job. We used to call Merrill Lynch as Mother Merrill. So Mother Merrill was really nice. It used to take care of all of us. But I really wanted to do something on my own, starting a company, right? Trying to create value. One of the things that really has stuck to me till date is one of my undergraduate professors. He was like, you guys are fortunate enough to be in one of the best engineering schools in India. You guys should be creating employment, right? And just don't think about being employed with somebody else. So that has really stuck with me throughout my life. And I was always looking for those kind of opportunities and how I can really create value and what I can do to leave a little bit of legacy, right? Whatever small amount of legacy behind. So when I started to think about what to do next, thinking about metals and lead at that particular time was it came natural because I got exposure from the market's perspective at Merrill. But one of my cousin brothers used to manufacture lead batteries for energy storage purposes. And I had grown up with this cousin brother of mine. I used to help him out for his business, trying to source some materials from US to India and so on. So we decided to look into closing the circular loop on lead battery recycling. And what I really found was that, these batteries are already recycled. None of these batteries are actually being thrown into the ground,
Mhm.
right? It's contrary to because people were getting paid for these end of life batteries.
Mhm.
So, but having said that, I mean, lead is extremely toxic. If you just Google what is the most dirty industry in the world, it will come out as lead battery recycling, right? Lead is extremely carcinogenic. Healthy people should not have exposure to lead,
Mhm.
simply stated, right?
Yeah.
That's why you have had lead being taken out from paints, from gasoline, and so on globally, right? But it is still one of the most used metals. Lead batteries are everywhere. So we decided to think about, how we can clean up the recycling of these lead batteries. So the idea was hey, the supply chain exists. So we don't really figure out how to move this commodity from point A to point B. But the main problem we were trying to solve was how you can clean it up and still make a difference to the environment while making good money out of it. That was the genesis of me getting into battery recycling long before it was sexy as it is now, right? So I hope that that sort of answers your question about how it all started.
Yeah, so for the interest of our friends out there who are not so familiar with the lead recycling industry, we know lead is in every vehicles out there. All the batteries swap out of your ICE engines are lead batteries.
Yeah.
But what's the process afterwards? What's the standard process? What is so pollutive about the current process? And what did you do, or like how did you find the technology to improve that 12 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, if you take aside Ace Green's technology stack to recycle lead batteries, everywhere else you use your very classical pyrometallurgy,
Hmm.
which in a nutshell is you break apart the batteries, throw everything into a very hot furnace, and tap out the molten metal. That's at the heart of it. But what really happens because of this, though, even though this process is, I would say, extremely scalable, commercialized globally, right? There are issues around very toxic and high amount of emissions, both carbon emissions as well as heavy metal emissions.
Right.
And we also produce a lot of toxic solid waste. Now, of course, the developed economies have pretty strict regulations. So people
Hmm.
have developed pollution control measures and so on. So
Hmm.
you are able to see a very stark difference between developed economies and developing economies, right? So in developed economies, still the it's still the same core technology of pyrometallurgy,
Hmm.
but done well in terms of pollution control measures.
And they capture all of the pollution and emissions going out in the atmosphere.
Correct. I mean, it's not all, but significantly most
Okay.
of them, right? But that has an added cost, both in terms of operating expenses
Right.
as well as the capital expenditures, right? While in the developing economies, say, for example, India or Latin America or Southeast Asia, right, where the regulations are not that strict, people, I mean, it's actually Wild West, to be very honest.
Mhm.
And you are able to do a lot more, right? So the recyclers are able to dump a lot of pollutants both into the air, into the ground, into the water streams, and so forth, right? And that was actually sort of our main aha moment that this sort of recycling is not sustainable,
Yeah.
right? So we decided to think out of the box, and very soon we realized that we would need a really sharp team of leaders, of engineers, chemists, metallurgists, right, who can think out of the box.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I did was the initial part of the team was strictly from non-classical lead recycling backgrounds,
Mhm.
because we did not want anybody to think how it is being done and
Right.
just think on the margins, right? Because we were trying to have a disruption, have a step change. It was not just about, hey, how I can make it X percentage better, or I can control X percentage emissions better, and so
Mhm.
on. So what we were thinking was yes, it gets recycled, awesome, it's not getting dumped into the ground, but the root cause of all problems is your this big furnace, right? Very high temperature furnace, which is the root cause of all pollutive problems. So how I can replace this furnace with
Mhm.
a more sustainable recycling process, right? And Lawrence, to be honest, it was significantly harder than I thought.
What's easy today?
Exactly. I mean, now I can see this in hindsight, hindsight 2020. Hard asset problems are very difficult to solve, but they are the most rewarding as well in the long
Mhm.
term, right? The barriers to entry for a just for a new entrant are significantly higher. So if you're able to solve a problem, your business is more sustainable,
Mhm.
is there to stay for significantly longer amount of time. It's not that easy for somebody else to come in, throw a piece of money, and get into the business, right? So from that perspective, it is extremely rewarding, and the journey has been actually worth it. So when we started off, we were able to realize soon enough that we could make a derivative of lead, one of the lead oxides that is
Mhm.
used in the energy storage lead batteries. And it's like, okay, great. We have been able to solve one problem. We took it to the market, and I was fortunate enough to get an introduction to one of the pioneers of lead batteries in India, a gentleman, Mr. Rakesh Malhotra, the founder of Luminous Batteries. And he gave me, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received. He's like, you need to shut down your business. And I was like, what? Why? I have this cool technology, right? I can make this lead oxide without using a smelter. It's like this is a very tiny uh, portion of the market. So even though I had this training at Merrill Lynch, thinking about the markets in a holistic sense, right? It was also a learning from an entrepreneur perspective
Mhm. Mhm.
that sometimes you get pigeonholed into one small thing and you're
Right.
trying to look at just your own solution and how cool it is. But looking at from a bird's eye view, if you're only trying to solve a smaller portion of the problem, it is not good enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what he told us, and as I said, I really have to thank him for that. Exactly what we have done today. He's like, can you make metal, not an oxide? Can you make lead metal without using a smelting furnace? Because if you are able to solve that, then you have really cracked a multi-billion dollar
Hmm.
problem, right? So we basically went back to the drawing board, rejigged the process, soon realized very soon that the whole process has to be scrapped and we had to start. So yeah, long story short, the team did a tremendous job. We were able to come up with a new process. What you see as today, right,
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
deployed today. We were able to solve a fundamental problem of scalability of hydrometallurgy in lead that a lot of people, a lot of other market participants had struggled. So we were able to devise a new cool way of electrolysis, if I just want to put it very succinctly, right? And we have plenty of IP on that part. So you are able to scale up and you are able to recycle a huge amount of lead, right? Because lead is heavy, and when people think about recycling of lead batteries, or just batteries in general, right? You have to think in terms of millions of pounds. You can't think in terms of thousands of pounds, right? Or kilotons, right? So if you cannot solve the problem at scale, even of a very nice, sexy solution at bench scale is of no use,
Right.
right? So it has to be economically viable. It should be able to compete with the incumbent technologies at scale, should be scalable. And then all the sustainability or all the green advantages are like a cherry on the top. So that was another training which we learned the hard way in our journey over the last 12, 13 years. That, okay, nice, cool technology, but okay, we're not going to deploy dollars on that, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So that was also a pretty cool lesson that we learned that, sustainability has to be there, but it has to stand on its economic feet on its own. And that's a philosophy that is now sort of inculcated deep within the company's DNA.
Right.
Like when you think about developing any technology stack, even marginal improvements, right? The
Yeah.
fundamental question we try to answer is A, scalable, B, is it going to be economically viable, both in terms of operational expenses and capital expenditures, right? It has to provide an ROI on the dollars deployed.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely love it because, I think it was way early in the days when you're able to pinpoint a problem that nobody else was really looking into, with the exception of a lot of industry experts. But
Yeah.
like you said, nobody thought there was another way of doing things, right? They kind of felt like pyrometallurgy is the way to go, and it's going to be the way to go for the next 7 decades per se. But through technology, able to find something that is able to reduce pollution, reduce emissions, and does the same job, right? Of course, lithium, right? You got into lithium eventually. What's that process like? Is it hard to change from lead to lithium? Is fundamentally the science very similar? And kind of what's your thinking process behind the move and understanding the new lithium market going forward?
So it's a lithium is a very fascinating story, to be honest, Lawrence. It's significantly more complex than lead because
Right.
you are dealing with multiple metal chemistry as
Hmm.
compared with just one metal chemistry. So what we were able to utilize or leverage the learnings in the lead were on understanding the handling of hazardous waste because
Hmm.
batteries are inherently hazardous, right? Understanding the basic handling mechanisms or the good practices of developing a technology stack. So, but the similarities end there, except that the technology stack has 0% commonalities, literally zero. So we had to really start from the scratch, right? The other major challenge that we or everybody else in the market is trying to tackle is the battery chemistry is also evolving. There's not one battery chemistry, right? So, for
Right.
example, if you look at from an application perspective, be it energy storage or mobility, the OEMs in the sector, right? They are manufacturing these batteries from their application perspective. Recycling is not on their mind.
Right.
It's like, okay, our core business, for example, if I'm a car manufacturer, my main goal is to make this car as affordable as possible,
Yep.
as better as possible, and let somebody else deal with the end of the life problem,
Exactly.
right? So you have, as a end of life solution provider, you also have to deal with this evolving chemistry stack. So how do you deal with evolving technologies? Because the moment if I have the two major, for example, the two major chemistries that are being deployed today are nickel and cobalt based
Hmm.
or iron based, right? Lithium is the common thing in between. And the value of the useful materials in these batteries are
Hmm.
significantly
Very
different,
different. Yeah.
right? The economics of recycling is like poles apart
Right.
for
Right.
nickel cobalt based versus iron based.
Yeah.
But the market is transitioning towards iron based batteries because
Hmm.
they are cheaper, more safer, and so on, right? If you look at the markets in China, which I think is the pioneer of this whole revolution,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think more than 65 odd percent new batteries across mobility and energy storage are now iron based LFP batteries.
LFP. Yeah.
So we started to work on the lithium-ion battery recycling about 3.25, 4 years ago at bench scale. At that time, we were trying to get to a solution, and as like everybody else, we were trying to recycle nickel and cobalt based
Hmm.
battery, right? One thing that we realized very fast was, and I think that again we were able to do that because of our experiences in lead, in developing the technology stack at lead. We were trying to think very early on from a perspective of economic viability, right?
Yeah.
And scalability. So the feedstock does not exist out of China. It is still the case, right?
Yeah.
And the incumbent technology stacks in the nickel cobalt battery recycling, right? Base battery recycling was essentially a derivative of the very old solvent extraction based technologies, which are
Hmm.
being in business for the primary extraction of these metals, right? So people said, okay, I have this technology stack which works beautifully at scale.
Right.
Now let me sort of adapt that to the battery recycling space, but something that works at significantly bigger scale. Then you're talking about like thousands, sorry, hundreds of thousands of kilotons
Hmm.
per annum, right? The economies of scale reach some commercial viability at those big scales.
Right.
How you can deploy the same amount of dollars and not have 10,000 tons of feedstock to feed that, right? So that has been a major problem in the industry, and a lot of
Hmm.
market players have struggled because of that.
Hmm.
So they
Hmm.
were when the market was very hot, the lithium prices were, surging at 50, 60, $70,000 a ton. Those numbers made sense. But when the markets became more rational, they came to more rational prices.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
there was not enough juice available at those market prices, right? So a lot of these kind of projects have struggled, and I think most of the names are you would know, the industry knows across
Mhm.
Europe and US.
Mhm.
So we were always concerned about the scalability from a feedstock perspective.
Right. Right.
So we went ahead and developed a significantly different technology stack as compared to the most of the market players. During that time, we realized that hey, we had to transition to LFP uh, because when you are trying to develop end of life solutions, right, you have to build for the future, not for
Right.
the past.
Right. Right.
Right? If the battery of the future is going to be iron-based LFP batteries, right? You cannot keep on developing technologies for nickel and cobalt-based batteries,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we decided to sort of strategically move away from nickel cobalt-based lithium-ion batteries
Right.
and sort of had our 100% focus on LFP batteries. So this is where we exist today. So we were able to develop a flow sheet which is significantly cheaper, is able to extract the lithium out at relatively high yields, right?
Hmm.
And we are currently operating a pilot facility in India. It's near Delhi that we're
Yeah.
operating. One of the other things that we are focusing on, just because the value of the useful materials is quite small
Hmm.
in electric batteries, our thought process, Lawrence, is that we have to think in terms of upcycling rather than just material reclamation,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
So we are spending a lot of our R&D dollars on the upcycling of graphite and the upcycling of iron phosphate.
Hmm.
Because if we are able to achieve that, that really moves the needle in terms of economic viability of recycling of LFP
Right.
batteries.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think it's what's fascinating is people are often attracted to the new shining object, right? But people forget that the largest battery out there in the market is still lead acid battery,
Yes,
right? No matter
yes,
how many EV you're going to put on the streets, it's still not going to compare to the traditional lead acid batteries. So I think it's A, fascinating to have a solution for that technology. And B, I think what a lot of people fail to realize is that, while Teslas are great, but if you look outside of the US, I think South America, Europe, Southeast Asia, they are adopting BYDs a lot faster just because the cost is so much lower than the Tesla.
correct, correct,
And there is a much higher likelihood for that to become a mass market product than, say, a Model 3 going to every household. And I think those BYDs comes with a LFP batteries,
correct.
right? And so if you look at the market size, I think it makes absolute sense to look at these, lead acid batteries, to look at these LFPs, even though they're not, the cool Tesla batteries, but its sheer market size, its sheer volume of it, A, it makes an environmental difference. And B, it makes a business difference as well. So that's why I think it's truly fascinating to kind of hear the approach you guys are taking with Ace, comparing to many of those mainstream players on the market, and which I think is a fantastic story to talk about. Now, this kind of segues into opportunities, right? Like you said today, a lot of people think that just because you're able to raise a lot of money, just because today you have a very high profile PR team going out there, it means that you could be a market leader. But I always believe that recycling business, especially in the material business and commodity business, it's a dollar and cents business, right? You are wrestling for pennies and nickels because there is a market price. I mean, just because you come from a superstar founder, it doesn't mean you can sell your lithium material for extra nickel. It is going on market price, whether you like it
Sure.
or not.
Yeah.
And of course, going to the market as a newcomer, right now you're looking to tackle the US market of various regions around the world as well. Where do you see as the opportunity in this battery recycling market? You mentioned upcycling, but you have equipped yourself with lead acid capacity, LFP capacities, also MNC you have to do so. how do you see this business growing in the future from your perspective?
No, I mean, that's an excellent point, Lawrence. You're absolutely right. In a commodity space, you have to tackle volumes and nickel and dime the margins, right? So the way we look at it is the battery recycling is a global problem,
Hmm.
right? We have to deal it in pretty much all the countries across the globe. So at ACE, what we have is a hybrid business model. So
Right.
we have certain key markets that we are focusing in from an own and operate perspective. So we intend to own the assets in
Hmm.
these markets. Number one and number two on the list are US and India.
Hmm.
And then the rest of the markets, we're looking at it from a licensing perspective.
Hmm.
So we realize that we cannot be everywhere, and B, in most of the developing countries, for example, you need a very good local partner,
Right.
right? The local partners who have established supply chains and so on, right? So in those markets, we look at licensing the technology. For example, Taiwan is a key market for us. We have licensed our technology to Acme Metals out there, a fantastic partner we have out there. From the US and India perspective, I think it's an it's a tremendous overall opportunity. So we have already selected a facility in Texas. It's in a town called Silsbee, Texas, about 30 odd minutes away from Beaumont, very close to the port. Very good facility, have ample utilities, space, close to the port, have access to railroad, for example. And in our first phase, we are focusing on developing a lead acid recycling facility.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have been able to execute both offtake and feedstock contracts for
Hmm.
that. The engineering work for the facility is currently ongoing, and the plan is to set up production towards early part of 2027. That's when we really want to start up the production at that particular point in time. On the same area, essentially, we will be setting a LFP recycling facility as well. So the idea is to develop this concept of a recycling park.
Right.
You are able to use synergies in back office and shipping and all of these things so that the same team can handle the logistics, for example. Of course, you have different set of operating teams, right?
Right.
And
Right.
this brings me to, again, the team aspect, which we touched upon early on, right? We do realize that we have to really recruit good talent. So we have been adding really, really good talent for the US team, both on the lead acid side as well as on the lithium-ion battery recycling front as well. And the idea is to continue building up these teams and sort of deploying our technology, create a blueprint for the US, right? US actually has one of the strictest norms when it comes to battery recycling. So the idea is to go out and prove it in the most tough market,
Hmm.
do it in a commercially viable manner,
Right.
and that sort of creates a blueprint for the expansion pan US and into the other markets like Europe. You also have Latin America and so on, right? For the lead market, for example, US is one of the best markets to operate in right now. The lead recycling capacity has decreased over the last few decades because of the closure of a few facilities owing to the pollution concerns.
Hmm.
So a lot of battery feedstock is moving overseas to Mexico, to Asia, for example.
Hmm.
So there's ample feedstock. Even if we set up 4 or 5 of our Texas-sized facilities, we're not going to take any single battery from the existing recyclers.
Right.
So we are not trying to threaten anybody in the market out there. We're just trying to take advantage of the opportunities that exist in the market, try and go out and create that blueprint of developing and creating economically sustainable, environmentally sustainable solutions for recycling of these batteries.
Hmm. Yeah, I think kind of coming full circle, we started by talking about why you got into the business. And from your perspective, how far along are you? Are you close to kind of solving the problem you set out to conquer, or do you think there's a long way to go, right? How far are we as a civilization from being able to making battery truly circular into the economy?
That's a very difficult question, Lawrence.
But that's a holy grail, right? I think that's everything.
Yes.
If you ask, somebody off the streets, that would be the single question they want to ask you. It's like, can we actually rid ourselves of these heavy metallic toxic waste out of the waste stream and making sure that they're recycling back into a new product?
I think we are close, but I also expect that we will have to continue to innovate at a very fast clip, right? Because these batteries will continue to mature. You will you will continue to have newer chemistries come up,
Right,
right?
right.
So being a recycler, being a critical materials player, we have to play catch up, right? With a lot of these evolving chemistries. So let me answer this question in two parts. Can they be truly circular? Yes, but the question that everybody has to answer it is at what cost and
Right,
how,
right.
right? So there is always this balancing act that we have to do in terms of being economically viable, right? I'm a firm believer of having positive economic returns generated, and those returns can help you innovate. You can continue to invest in your R&D, right? So our goal at ACE, Lawrence, is to continue to innovate, develop high-end technologies that will allow us to continuously move towards a truly circular solutions in an economically viable manner, right? That is the goal. Are we 100% there? No. Can we get there in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Possibly, yes. And that's our goal. This is what keeps us up at night. This is what is truly exciting. And I mean, that's what we as a company are working towards, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
find those solutions across multiple domains, multiple battery chemistries, and how we can make it truly circular.
Right. I think another wonderful thing that you guys have done is bringing a lot of the global players into the idea of clean battery recycling. I think from the Glencores to the Trafiguras, to a lot of the small, medium, large recyclers all over the world, in India, in South Africa, in Australia, in Eastern Europe, all over the world. I think giving them the tool and opportunity, because like you said, I think every country has different standards.
Correct.
And if you give them a solution that is economically feasible,
Correct.
then it's a lot easier for them to use a better process than, say, dumping it somewhere and trying to hide that from the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where our hybrid business model actually plays a key role, right? So, for example, you said about Southeast Asia. So we have Taiwan. You said about Eastern Europe. We have Armenia, right? So these are places where the market sizes are not that huge, right? We don't believe that we can go out there and set up our own facilities and be economically viable and generate huge amount of economic returns. But if we can help the incumbents out there to upgrade their technologies, that is a huge prize. I mean, a huge prize for us to win, and it creates a win-win for everybody, right? So this is what we have done. I mean, Taiwan is already operating. We are about to ship equipment for Armenia, right? And we're looking forward to that project starting commercial production in Q1
Amazing.
2026. Yes. And we have a huge pipeline of projects that we're looking forward to under this hybrid business model, while keeping our eyes fully focused on our flagship Texas project as well, right? But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, different countries, different regulations, different economic structures, right? So we are also, I mean, that's one of the challenges we're also trying to address is how do you customize the CapEx deployments as
Right.
well, right? So like without compromising on the quality of the technology stack, like
Hmm, hmm.
for example, what I can afford to deploy in Texas is not the same that I can afford to deploy in India or Taiwan or
Right.
Armenia,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's also a big challenge that we are trying to solve, like how we can make the equipments which can still do the job in a very safe, commercially viable manner, but have the capex that is customized for Armenia, capex that is customized for Texas, for example, right?
Yeah.
So
You are preaching to the choir. We have to make a technology that works for the world, but also can be commercially viable too. If you only
correct.
have one of the two, then that's not going to be a sustainable business whatsoever.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, my friend. It's always a joy talking to you. And to our friends out there, if you want to look into technology and battery recycling, Google Ace Green Recycling, and you'll see a lot of the cool things that Vipin and Nishay and team are building out there all over the world. All right, and thank you, Vipin.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was wonderful talking to you, Lawrence.